Have you ever left in the middle of a date? I told her I was colorblind. She recoiled and said it was gross and sat there looking at me like I had the plague or something. I just sort of got up and left. It was really odd. Edit. I don't think she was racist. It was more of a you a cripple kind of disgust. I don't really know.
That sounds pretty awkward. It's strange how some people react to things they don't understand. I've had moments where someone's reaction just didn't make sense. It's odd that someone would get that kind of vibe from something like colorblindness. You'd think it would be more about who you are, not some condition. In the end, it's probably more about their perspective than anything.
We were already dating, but I thought it would be nice to take her for a meal one evening. She walked in, followed by her sister, then her best friend, and their respective boyfriends, all of whom had no money. She got upset when I said I didn't have enough money to feed 6 when a meal for 2 would have set me back 40 pounds or more, so I left. She sent me a text on my way home saying we were over. I didn't bother replying. To this day, I have no idea why she thought it was socially acceptable to bring 4 more people to our date without telling me first.
That's definitely a tough situation. You planned a nice meal, and she just decided to turn it into a group outing without asking. It's fair to feel frustrated at being put on the spot like that. Sometimes communication gets lost, and it leads to misunderstandings. It's probably for the best that you didn't engage further after that. Let's be real, you can't just show up with a crowd to a one-on-one date.
She started talking about our wedding and our future kids on our first date. She wasn't joking around, and when I told her that it was way too sudden to be talking about that, she looked at me quizzically and said, "Don't you want to get married?" First online date I'd ever gone on. Plenty of awkward ones after that, including the girl who got drunk, then admitted she had an infant son and lived with her ex-husband. But that one took the cake.
Sounds like that first date set a weird tone. I mean, discussing marriage and kids right off the bat can catch anyone off guard. Dating can be a real mix of surprises, though. I've had my own fair share of strange encounters, too. It's funny how some people dive deep into things before even getting to know each other. Guess it makes for good stories later on.
Guy from OkCupid a few years back takes me to a 5-star restaurant. I try to stick to the middle-of-the-road drinks/food as it's a first date. Dinner went really well, so we decide to go for post-dinner drinks. I get to the point where I feel I should stop drinking since it's a first date, and I wasn't really ready for him to see me trashed. He orders me another drink, and then invites me over to his house because his wife is out of town. Date over.
Sounds like that date took an unexpected turn. You start off thinking it's going to be a nice evening, and then you find out there's a whole other layer to the guy. Always a reminder to pay attention to those red flags. It's weird how quickly things can shift from dinner to, well, a no-go situation. Just goes to show not everyone is who they seem on a dating app.
The myth online. She brought her sister on our first date. She never spoke, and all her sister did was drill me about my plans and my intentions. After ordering, she said, "I hope you're planning on paying." That's what a real man would do on a first date. So I said, "True, but this wasn't a date. It was a job interview." I dropped my half in cash and walked out. By the way, I drove us there. Never heard from him again.
That's a wild experience for a first date. Meeting someone's sister can be awkward, especially when she's just grilling you the whole time. The comment about paying was a real curveball. Your response was pretty clever, though. Honestly, you dodged a bullet there. Sounds like they weren't really on the same page when it came to dating expectations. It's just better that you moved on.
I left in the middle of a movie once. The date was going great, but I forgot that I had left a pot pie in the oven in my apartment. Only broke college guys and old people eat pot pies. I remembered a few minutes in and whispered something along the lines of, "Gotta get my pot pie out of the oven, so I don't burn down my apartment. I'll be right back." I did return, but she was pissed. Thought we could go see the pot pie and have a laugh. Arrived at my previously empty apartment to find my brother and the neighbor girls drunk and naked in my living room. Showed her the pot pie, and she said something along the lines of, "You're an asshole, take me home."
That sounds pretty wild. You had a solid reason to leave, but it escalated quickly. Pot pie turned into a whole situation. I guess you can't plan for unexpected visitors like that. It's one of those moments you think back on and just shake your head. Sometimes dates go south for reasons you can't control, like a surprise party in your own living room.
Met a guy online who lived about an hour away. We agreed to meet up closer to me, and he told me he was just going to stay in town that night. I figured he had friends here or whatever. He gets to the date, and he is clearly about 15 years older than his pictures represented. I figured I would finish the meal, then GTFO. After dinner, he insisted on walking me to my car, and then said, "Okay, so I'll just follow you back to your place then?" I was quite shocked and a little scared for my safety, so I said okay, and then ripped out of that parking lot before he could get to his car. He texted me an hour later and told me he was home, LOL. Never heard from him after that.
That's a tense situation. Online meetings can be tricky when the reality doesn't match the profile. It's good that you trusted your instincts and left before things got uncomfortable. You never know how people will act in person. Sounds like he got the message too since he didn't reach out again. Sometimes, it's just better to exit quickly and safely.
Met a guy in a mall I worked at. He was cute and shy. After a week of flirting, he asked for my number. I was so stoked. We got to texting, and it turns out we were neighbors. He asked me to go for a walk that night, and I happily said yes. He gave me a creepy vibe within a few minutes of the date starting, so I started planning my out. I told him I had a late-night yoga class, and I had to get home. On the walk to my place, he asked if I wanted to see pictures on his phone. I agreed, thinking that they were going to be pictures of his dog or something. Nope, pictures of naked girls from the internet. Luckily, we made it to my apartment building, and he asked to hug me. I basically ran in the door, and as soon as I was safe inside, I messaged him I wasn't interested in him. He stalked me for months. Upwards of 70 texts a day. It took friends showing up and threatening him. Edit. I forgot that he had to talk in a whisper to control his severe stutter. I have a very minor one, so it wasn't a total deal breaker. But looking back on it, totally creepy.
That's a rough situation. You think you're starting something nice, and it turns out to be a major red flag. It's wild how quickly vibes can shift. The texting is over the top too. Good on you for getting out of there, and for having your friends back you up when it got out of hand. Not everyone is what they seem at first. Just goes to show to trust your instincts.
This didn't happen to me, but a stoner buddy of mine left during the middle of the date because he was high and forgot he was on one. They had smoked up before drinks at his local pub, and she went to use the washroom, wasn't a little too long, and he just plumb forgot he wasn't there alone and went home. This was before cell phones were super common. Fuck, I am old. So there was no "what the fuck are you" text.
That's a wild one. Your friend must have been really lost in his own head. Just zoning out like that during a date is something else. It's funny to think about how different things were before everyone had their phones glued to them. Imagine the girl coming back and realizing he just vanished. Classic stoner move, really. At least he probably had a good reason for it, not that it helps her out.
I have done it once. We arranged to meet at a bookstore because that is where I am most comfortable meeting people. When he arrived, he looked nothing like his photo and stood way too close. So close that I couldn't even think of a situation where standing that close to someone is ever acceptable. I decided to walk around, and hopefully my walking around would put some distance, but no. Somehow this guy was able to stay glued to me the entire time. Every question I asked was replied with an "I don't know." Finally, I said I was feeling really uncomfortable and was going to go home. I turn to leave, and I feel his hand go from my shoulder down my back to my hip. It made me cringe so bad. I noped out fast.
That sounds really awkward. Meeting someone from online can be hit or miss. It's tough when they don't match the vibe of their profile. The whole personal space issue is a big deal too. If you feel uncomfortable, it's totally fine to leave. Trusting your gut in those situations is important. Good call on just walking away. It's better to avoid something that doesn't feel right.
She had come to my dorm room drunk 2 times before to sleep it off. Nothing happened. Then wanted to go on a date for Chinese food. She couldn't stop talking about country music, how sexy she thought trucks were. I did not have a car, how stupid she thought nerds were. I was a CSCI major, and how she was still in love with her previous boyfriend. I pretended to have an emergency and left about halfway through and didn't talk to her again.
That sounds like an awkward situation. It's always tough when someone's not really your type, but they're all in. I get it. Sometimes it's better to just cut it off. You tried the date, but if the vibe's off, there's no point in forcing it. People have their own preferences, and it's okay to move on when it's not a match. Keeping things simple can save a lot of trouble.
Not a date, but I left dinner with my brother and his crazy girlfriend of the month. This one wouldn't stop telling us about how she had recently conquered a dream shark that was giving her nightmares. It was a metaphor for her life or something. I told them my cat was sick after she showed us a picture she drew of the shark. I really did try, but after 30 minutes being lectured on a dream shark, I lost it.
Sounds like a long dinner. I've had my share of uncomfortable meals too. One time, my friend wouldn't stop talking about this recent life revelation he had, and I just sat there thinking about my cat's health. Sometimes you just want to escape from conversations that go on forever. I guess some people like diving into their own strange stories, but it can get exhausting fast.
When I was in college, a girl I knew who had an interest in me asked me to go with her to a sorority pledge dinner/event. She needed a date and didn't want to go alone, so I felt I was doing her a favor. But I didn't know anybody, so would stay relatively close to my date in the event she wanted to introduce me or simply to act like a date, staying somewhat close. After dinner, she went from one person to the next and was awkward because she wouldn't say anything and just walk off so I would follow. At one point, with about 3 of her future sorority members around, she turned and said, "Are you just going to follow me all night like a puppy dog?" I looked at her and simply said, "No," and walked away. I walked straight to the car and left. Don't know how she got home and didn't care. She went to where I worked the next day, crying, and told me how sorry and rude she was and wanted to go out again. I was nice to her, but going out on a second date was not going to happen.
I remember this one time in college when a girl asked me to be her date for a sorority event. I thought I was helping her out, but she kept drifting away from me. It got awkward fast. At one point, she called me out for following her like a puppy. I just said no and left. Next day, she found me at work all upset, wanting another chance. I was cool, but I didn't want to go out again.
He kept glaring at the bartender who was smiling at me while pouring my glass of wine. When I asked the bartender for a recommendation, the guy was not happy that the dude and I were talking. I went into the bathroom and had my friend call me in 5 minutes to pretend to be my roommate locked out of our apartment. Keep in mind that this was the first time we've met face to face and first date. Edit, know everyone. The 2 men were not plotting to roofie me. The bartender was smiling at me, being polite, and could tell that the date was not going anywhere since all the dude could talk about was how life-changing a trip he went on 3 years previous was.
Sounds like a classic awkward first date. You get all dressed up, hoping for a good time, and then the guy can't handle the bartender being friendly. That's a huge red flag. Using a bathroom break as an escape plan is smart. Sometimes you just have to bail when the vibe is off. Glad you had a backup plan. Better to leave early than sit through a cringy evening.
I was 19 and accepted a date with an older guy. I thought he was probably 27 or so, but it turns out he's 37. The club where we met/danced/he got my number was sort of dark. We go to dinner, and he starts reminiscing about going parking and making out back in the day, and would I like to go for a drive later? Something I ate gave me a stomachache. Sadly, I had to go home early, in a taxi.
That definitely sounds like an interesting experience. It's always weird when you find out someone's actually a lot older than you thought. The dinner part took a turn with the stomachache, though. Going home in a taxi instead of having a fun drive is a bummer. Guess that's how it goes sometimes, just awkward dates and unexpected issues. At least you got home safely.
Great thread. Sad I'm a little late with mine. So, first date, we were talking about TV shows we like, and she mentioned my Big Fat Gypsy Wedding, which I had also seen and liked. Then she said, I wish American men could be real men like gypsy men or Okaway. I don't think the traveler lifestyle is the healthiest on the planet. Lowest life expectancy in Europe, rampant illiteracy, domestic abuse, all the bad stuff. Plus the expectation to be married by 18 at the latest. So she was clearly unmarriable to a traveler, even if she'd not been the wrong ethnicity for them. My family does a bunch of outreach in the traveler community, helping them go to school, find housing if they want to settle, that kind of thing. So I am more familiar with this lifestyle than someone who watched one TV show one time. So I tell her some of this. Then she says that I'm not a real man because I don't want to be a domineering patriarch, and that it's probably all because I was raised by a single mother and therefore know nothing about what a man is supposed to be like. End of date.
That sounds like a rough experience. It's interesting how quickly people can jump to conclusions about someone based on their background. I had a friend who faced a similar situation on a date. They had a conversation about relationships, and it turned awkward when the other person had a rigid idea of masculinity. Sometimes those differences just can't be bridged, and it's better to call it a night. Dating can really bring out these unexpected moments.
Yes, first and last date. He picked me up at my place. Before we drove off, he told me he was apartment sitting/cat sitting for a friend a couple of blocks away from my place, and he just needed to check on the cat before heading out for dinner. I said, sure, not a problem. So we go to this apartment. I stand in the doorway while he does his thing, feeding the cat and whatnot. I just ask, whose apartment is this? Just making small talk. His response, it's my ex-girlfriend's of 7 years. She's totally okay if we fuck on her bed. At that point, I just turn, open the door, and walk out of the apartment without saying a word. Never heard from him again.
That's a pretty wild first date story. Just the whole vibe shifts when he mentions the ex-girlfriend like that. I get wanting to make light of things, but some things shouldn't be joked about. Good call on leaving, though. No need to stick around for that energy. I guess it was a learning experience for both sides. Sometimes, people just reveal their true colors way too soon.
Yes, I have. I didn't know it when I agreed to be set up with her, but she and her boyfriend had broken up about 6 weeks before we went out on Valentine's Day, no less. She was an emotional, hysterical wreck from the start. She was fluctuating between periods of rage and abject sobbing without much time in between. I've never felt so bad for anyone as I did for her during the hour or so we were together. She was clearly not ready to be on a date, understatement of the year, maybe. So after 40 long minutes, I politely told her that the date was over and that I would be taking her home. Believe it or not, she's actually a friend of mine now. I wouldn't say we're terribly close, but we text fairly often. She did also text me a few days later to apologize and thank me for handling it as well as I did.
That sounds like a tough situation. Going on a date with someone who's clearly not over another relationship is awkward. I get why you decided to end it early. It can be hard to watch someone struggle like that. It's good that you two could stay friends afterward, though. Shows you handled it with care. Those kinds of experiences can lead to unexpected connections, even if they start off rough.
My sister was on a first date, and he let her pick the movie. She picked a really artsy movie. Halfway through, he got up and left her in the theater. She ended up finishing the movie since she wanted to see it. He was waiting for her outside the theater, said he couldn't sit through any more of the movie, but he liked her and asked if they could continue the date and go for drinks. He is now my brother-in-law.
That's an interesting start to a relationship. Your sister really committed to the movie even when he bounced. It's funny how sometimes a rough first date can lead to something good later on. At least he was honest about it and wanted to keep the date going. Sounds like it worked out for them in the end.
Yep, mid-20s, met the guy. Mutual friend said he was nice and that I should go out with him. After dinner, which was awkward, no connecting, he said he wanted to go to his place and get whatever, I do not recall. So he has a roommate, very creepy guy, around 40, balding, seedy, greasy t-shirt. About the only furniture was a disgusting couch, leaking foam rubber, stained, and a tripod with inversion boots to hang upside down in, which I was invited to use in pretty scary terms. I was not wearing pants, which they pointed out too. I left in a big hurry and dropped the friends that thought this dude was okay.
That sounds like a rough experience. It's crazy how sometimes friends can miss red flags with people. Meeting someone new should feel exciting, but awkward dinners and creepy roommates can really kill the vibe. I guess it's a good lesson in trusting your gut and knowing when to bail. Dropping those friends was probably a smart move. You want connections that feel safe, not like a horror movie set.
I definitely have. I tried Tinder dating because I figured why not? It's shallow, but at least you should know in advance whether there will be a physical attraction, right? Well, I was so wrong. So, I show up expecting to see a guy who I bonded with because we both compete in powerlifting and as such are in good physical shape, and he is 23 and I am 20. Nope, he had been using some fairly old pictures because 1, he was fat, 2, he was at least 30 years old. I'll let it slide and think we can potentially still have a nice time having a drink, and I just won't sign up for a second date. So we sit down and are in the middle of having a beer, having a decent chat I may add, when we start discussing how our luck has been on Tinder so far. I'm nearly done my beer when he says, yeah, I figured to be successful I'd have to lower my standards. That's why I matched with you. I was absolutely floored and had no idea how to respond, so I just excused myself to the bathroom, paid the waitress for my beer, and gave her a tip, and left.
Yeah, that's rough. You go into these things hoping for a good time, and then something like that happens. His approach was really off, to be honest. It's like he missed the point of dating. You should connect, not just lower standards. It's good you left instead of sticking around. You never know how people will turn out, but at least you got a story out of it. That's kind of the vibe with online dating, I guess.
I was in grade 11 and she was in grade 9. Super cute girl who made me smile and feel alive after a horrible breakup a few weeks earlier. We went to the mall to walk around, have lunch, maybe go shopping, keeping it light for a first date. She was really into her random phase, but I thought it was cute because it wasn't the real her, so I put up with it. But it was exhausting. After lunch, she must have had this amazing idea of playing hide and seek. So when we walked by the elevator, she ran in at the last second and texted me, "Find me XD." I left.
That's a classic situation. You tried to keep it light after a tough time, and then it turns into something unexpected. It's funny how people show different sides of themselves. That whole random thing can be a lot, especially when you're just trying to enjoy a date. It's kind of wild she thought of hide and seek. But honestly, just leaving was probably the best move. Sometimes things just don't click.
I asked a girl out to the hookah lounge I used to work at once. First thing that bugged me was that she texted nonstop from the beginning onward. On top of that, she would hog the hose even when she wasn't smoking it much. My breaking point, though, was when she casually mentioned that she'd done meth a few times and thought it was fun. No fucking thank you, even if you were hot, until the meth catches up, anyways. Luckily for me, a friend of mine showed up, and after I ducked to the bathroom and texted him, we began operation. Super third wheel, and he sat down with us, took all of the focus on conversation to himself, and eventually I ended up just leaving with him to go to a different lounge. Thank you, Homer. You're my lifesaver, buddy.
That sounds rough. It's wild how some people can just change the vibe, right? The texting nonstop and hogging the hose is one thing, but mentioning meth? That's a big red flag. Good call on getting your friend in there to turn things around. Sometimes you really need a backup. It's nice to have friends who can rescue you from awkward situations. Glad you managed to escape that one.
Met this guy through a friend. He's got a tattoo of baby footprints on his forearm. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty. Who is it for? And he's like, Joshua, my son. And I didn't know he had a son. But he finished it up with, yeah, don't you feel like an idiot now? I still don't know what I should have felt like an idiot for besides agreeing to a date with him, but I got up and left.
Your story is interesting in a way. Meeting new people sometimes leads to these awkward moments. It's weird how a simple tattoo can spark such a reaction. The whole vibe of thinking you know someone but finding out something surprising can be uncomfortable. Getting up and leaving seems like a solid choice if the conversation takes a strange turn. Sometimes it's best to move on when the energy shifts like that.
Not me, but a friend of mine. Him and his date are walking down the street, and they see a little girl being excited about something. My friend loves little kids. He melts at anything adorable. Before he can comment on how adorable the kid is, his date goes, UGH, kids are so annoying. He doesn't say anything, because she's a good-looking girl, and he's just going to overlook it, and everyone is entitled to their opinion. So they continue walking down the street, and someone walks by in a Batman shirt. My friend is the biggest Batman fan I know. Like, he will convert Superman fans into Batman fans. Girl comments, Batman is so stupid. Comics are stupid. It's so nerdy. My friend abruptly stopped, turned around, and just walked off without ever saying a word to her.
I remember when a friend of mine was on a date. They saw a little girl being cute, and he was about to say something nice. But then his date said kids were annoying. He just stayed quiet because she was attractive. Later, a guy in a Batman shirt walked by, and she called Batman stupid. That was it for him. He just left without saying a word. Simple deal, really?
Went bowling with a girl I had met a night before. I made some irrelevant joke, unimportant what it was, and she started openly yelling at me about how the sentence I spoke was somehow grammatically incorrect. I, horrified, apologized and tried to make it less awkward by moving on. She replies saying all she wants to be is a stay-at-home mom. She then started telling me about how she can't wait to have babies, and that she at least wants 9. At this point, I was simply terrified, so I was about to tell her that I didn't think it was going to work out, and that I would just leave when she started doing yoga in the middle of the bowling alley to show me how flexible she was. After I sat through that with the epitome of a red face from embarrassment, she started telling me that bowling would be way easier if she didn't have such big, heavy boobs. Proceeded to then ask me to feel them. I just went to the bathroom and blocked the number. TLDR, yelled at for grammar mistake, lectured about babies, then asked me to feel her up in a bowling alley all on a first date. I ran.
That's a wild first date story. Meeting someone new can be unpredictable. The grammar thing is unexpected, though. It's funny how casual activities can turn into these awkward moments. And then jumping to babies and yoga? That's a lot of info to take in. Asking you to feel her up in the bowling alley crosses a line for sure. Sometimes it's just better to cut your losses and move on. You did the right thing.
I had been casually dating a guy. I think this was our 3rd date. We were planning on dinner, a movie, and then him coming over to my place for, I assume, some fun. Right after we ordered, he said, "So, I think we should stop seeing each other. My girlfriend is getting suspicious." This floored me since it was my understanding that both of us were single gay men. I flagged down the waiter and asked him to box up my food. Then I let my date pay for it.
That's a rough turn of events. You think you're building something, then bam, out of nowhere, the guy drops a bomb like that. It's weird how people can just be open about dating while still keeping secrets. You handled it well, though. Wrapping up the dinner and letting him deal with the bill sounds like a solid move. Gotta protect your vibe.
Well, I think it was the middle of the date for him. It wasn't the middle for me. Went on an online date. The whole time, it was pretty clear we weren't compatible, at least to me. He lived at home with his parents, was almost unemployed, and asked me why I had previously rejected him on insert dating site here. Apparently, I had previously told him no thanks. I don't remember half the people I talked to, let alone why I might have said no thanks, though I should have in this case. That was a giant red flag already, and I was getting ready to get the hell out when he goes, "Do you want to go back to your place and watch YouTube videos?" 1. It has been 1 hour. We just met. I made it very clear that I'm not looking for a quick lay. 2. Did you really just invite yourself to my apartment? I told him no. This isn't gonna work. He got mad and stormed out.
That's rough. Online dating can be tricky. It sounds like he was totally missing the vibe. Bringing up past rejections is a bad move. And then suggesting to go to your place after just an hour? Definitely a no-go. It's good you stood your ground. Sometimes you just know when it's not right. Better to end it early than waste more time. At least you learned something from it.
I got the peculiar feeling that he was gaming or something. Like he had some preset lines memorized to reply with to certain things. He was forceful and very touchy and was intensely interested in his phone. And his hair had a shit ton of gel in it, so he looked like a greased weasel. I was coping until made some kind of offhand, "I'll take you home tonight, if you're lucky," accompanied by a wink, and I lost it. I put some money down and politely excused myself. Yeesh.
That sounds pretty uncomfortable. It's weird when someone acts all scripted like that. The touchiness and phone obsession just add to the vibe. It's good you recognized it and left. No need to stick around for that. Sometimes a quick exit is the best move when things feel off. You made the right call for sure.
We've been seeing each other for a little over the week, and halfway through the dinner, she tells me she slept with over 14 men who were mostly in their 40s, who were 19 at the time, because they always want to buy me things afterwards. People can do what they want to do on their own time, but announcing such a thing in a glib manner and sleeping with people for some type of personal gain is just not behavior I want to tolerate.
It's interesting how people have different views on relationships. For me, sharing something like that on a first date feels off. I get everyone has their history, but the whole transactional vibe just doesn't sit right. I prefer genuine connections, not exchanges based on what you can get. It's cool to be open, but there's a line between honesty and just being inconsiderate. Guess we just didn't see eye to eye on that.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.